I found peace, loving on those who hate me. I found joy, raising babies with an angel on earth. I found worthless, saving dollars on a rock in space. I won't kill for gold, no. No one can tell me that it's over. I know you came back from the grave, and I own nothing if it pulls me away. You can.
Morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of
The Q Show.
Today, you ever get that feeling that you slid into home base barely by the hair of your chinny chin? So we kind of did it. We eviscerated this. Well, I say we, I mean me. I eviscerated the studio over the last 2 days, rewired everything. There's cables. I'm not going to show you. Cables hanging everywhere. And right now, we're truly just hoping that you can hear us and it still sounds relatively normal. But so if you can't hear us, let us know, and that way we can try to make adjustments. But yeah, we're trying again on several new technologies and trying to kind of make all this work. So what have you been up to, Brian?
Same old, same old.
Same old.
Yeah.
Which is what is it these days? Endless firmware updates and
Yeah. Just getting the firmware ready for launch. Just little things here and there. We're in pretty good shape. So, we're targeting September 1st, right?
Labor Day. Yep.
Labor Day. Okay.
That's what we're shooting for.
So at this point, it's just, odds and ends. But we're on schedule.
And what is that like when you, as you're kind of cruising down firmware toward the end of a project? Like it's tough for me to understand, and I have an office right next door to you. What is that like as you're kind of getting toward the end of it? I like what on earth is firmware? I know,
Okay.
but I'll just so the world can know.
So firmware is like it's software, but it's written to run on an embedded device. So I guess that begs the question: what is an embedded device? So Elevate has microprocessors in it,
Right.
and they run this software, but it's programmed into the device, and so we call it firmware because it's it's not as easy to update like if you're running software on a computer.
Right.
Although the line has been somewhat blurred these days, right? Because it's become a lot easier to update firmware. In the old days, it was either a lot more difficult or impossible.
Wow.
So that's why it was called firmware as opposed to, because it's code that's running on a device, but it was just more difficult or impossible to update.
Right. So it was firm because it was firmly put into the device,
Right.
and that
you could program it, but either you couldn't reprogram it, or reprogramming it involved replacing a ROM chip.
Oh wow.
Or using a programming device
Right.
that would have to plug into the unit.
Right.
But now it's universally become a lot easier. So
So all the stuff for programming is typically on board nowadays,
Yeah.
actually on the device. So
yeah.
makes it. I mean, and this thing, for what it's worth, I don't know that we can really show that sort of a thing right at the moment, but you plug it in, it connects to a Chrome browser, and then
Right.
you can update the thing off of a website.
Yeah.
Which is pretty slick. Yeah. The world has changed.
Yeah. So, by the time we get to this phase in a project, best case scenario is that you're fixing bugs faster than they come up, right? Like if the bugs are just piling up, and you can't fix them fast enough, then you're in trouble. You know.
Yeah.
I've worked on a lot of projects like that.
Yeah.
So we're actually in a good position where, you know, occasionally a little bug we'll find a little bug,
Right.
and I fix it. But most of the time, you know, I'm just trying to find the bugs or
Right.
addressing little feature requests and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're in the other scenario where we can fix the bugs faster than they pop up. So that's good.
That's a good sign.
That's where you want to be. And the bugs we're finding they're not serious.
Yeah, because actually, I think you've been adding features more than anything lately. So
Yeah.
some things that we might have already covered might be slightly different by the time we actually launch the product. I'm thinking tremolo, but yeah. So you know, we're definitely advancing the. I'd say we're advancing the state of the art, but really, you know, because now I've got a couple beta prototypes out now. And I sent one to Jack Ryan Sullivan. What's up? And the report is glowing. You
Nice.
know, he's resonating with the whole anti-modeler thing and just going, nah, this is like a guitar workstation. You know, like I never thought about calling it that. But what is the term we came up with? Intelligent guitar?
Intuitive guitar engine.
Intuitive guitar.
What do you guys think? You think that's a good description?
Well,
Let us know.
yeah. I have to concur with that. It's definitely one of the. Okay.
So last week we talked about the effects, and this week we're going to talk about the compressor, noise gate, the global settings, and I also want to cover the alternate foot switch functions because
Cool.
we haven't really talked about that in detail, at least. But we had a couple questions pop up since last week, and I'm sorry, I didn't note who asked these questions. So, and I think they emailed us through the website as well,
Or added it after the fact. Yeah. Some of these came in as comments.
Yeah. So someone was asking. So this person is listening to us on the podcast, and so can't see like our signal chain, and was wondering what's the signal chain
Oh, gotcha.
in this setup. And it's simple. I mean, it's just guitar into the Elevate into our
I think we're going into a touch mix
a touch mix.
today, and then that all feeds into a Rodecaster Pro.
Yeah. So, but everything after Elevate nothing's processing the signal after that.
Yeah, 100% clear.
Yeah. So there's no amp because I think he was wondering like, is this running into an amp
Right.
that's being mic'd or, you know, direct with a direct out? And it's nothing like that. It's
Right.
only Elevate. And then he was also asking, what's the best amp to use with Elevate, or should it be used with an FR?
The answer is yes. The Mach 3 is the best amp to use with it. I'll answer that. Actually, in part because, you know, the temptation is to think that, you know, if something quote unquote is a modeler, which it's not, it's the anti-modeler. It's an intuitive guitar engine. If you plug that into an amplifier, will it be different? And the answer is yeah. I mean, because there's cabinet simulation built into the product. But let's say you want to use it with a guitar amplifier. You want that sound that speaker's making because it sounds great with your instrument. By all means, just shut the cab sim off. There's a global right for that.
Yeah, you can disable the cab sim on the line outputs globally.
Yep.
So you don't have to go through all your presets and turn the cab sim off.
So you know, the answer really gets down to, yeah, you can just use this thing, turn the cab sim off, and actually let your cabinet do its job and still have great sound and show up with a really simple rig that just sounds fantastic. So yeah, go for it. And if you want to plug it directly into FR.
Yeah, I personally prefer the sound of it run into an FR or just direct or headphones, like something full range.
Yeah.
And I guess we should note that all of the factory presets were designed that way.
Yep.
So if you do run it into an amp, you'll sort of give up that flexibility of having the different cabs on different presets.
Yeah. So, well, the other thing is there's a certain extension that reverb effects get that can, harmonically be kind of higher than some guitar cabinets can even effectively reproduce, depending on the cabinet, of course. But, so you can kind of, in a weird sort of way, it's like having like a studio kind of in the palm of your hand at that point. So yeah, you'll get more in terms of FRFR, but this is why I said Mach 3, because, we have an FRFR switch on the back of it. So if you want to send it to the PA, you're golden.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into it. First, let's talk about the compressor. I just picked this preset here because it's pretty clean. I turned the effects off.
Yep.
Just for this demonstration. And so the compressor block, the modes that are pre-configured for it are essentially set up to just give you kind of generally different levels of compression.
Right.
Right. Subtle, light, medium, heavy. There's also a mode in here for limiting boost, which is just it's a level boost with the compression threshold set pretty high, just to limit it,
right,
so you don't overdrive too much. Let's go through some of these.
Well, and a reminder for everybody, modes, remember, a mode changes the underlying parameters.
Yes.
But this begs one more question. Like, what is a compressor for those people who
okay.
don't know?
All right. So a compressor, and, this is where I wish we had something I could write on here. I mean, most people don't care about the technical stuff. So I'll just try to describe it without getting too technical.
That works.
So a compressor is going to reduce the gain when the signal gets above a certain threshold.
Right.
And the idea is to try to reduce the dynamic range and increase the sustain of the signal. That's sort of it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And so as we get into talking about the parameters in more detail, I think this might make a little more sense.
Right.
Because we can talk about all the parameters that kind of affect that.
Right. And we'll demonstrate it a little bit.
Yeah. So the modes are just set up. These are mini presets that pre-configure all of the underlying parameters and just make it easy for it's easy and quick to set up, but it's also an easy way for people who don't really want to get into all the details of how all the parameters change the effect and it can be a little overwhelming for some people. So if you don't want to get into that level of detail, just stick with the modes.
Yeah.
So limiting boost. Actually, let me disable this first so you can hear it without the compressor. So immediately you hear the limiting boost does boost it, right?
Right.
And it's probably, with single coil pickups, you probably don't really have enough level to kind of hit that limiter.
Right.
But if you're putting in like a pretty hot humbucker, you would probably start to hit that that limit. So let's go to the next mode. I'm just going to kind of scroll through these so you can hear the difference. So you can hear on the heavy, you can start to hear it.
Like pull down.
Start to splash a little bit. And then again with it off. Compressor on.
Boy, and it sustains.
So that gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on there. So let's dig down into the parameters for this. I'm going to start with a light compression, and I'm going to copy this into a custom mode. Okay, so the first screen you have shows the threshold and the ratio. Threshold is the level at which compression starts to engage. And this is shown in dBr. R means relative, so dB relative to full scale.
Right.
So 0 dB would be like the absolute maximum signal you can put into this.
Right.
This is 39 dB below that. That's where it starts to kick in.
Gotcha.
Ratio is the amount of compression above the threshold. So
Right.
for every 4 dB, in this case, 4 to 1, for every 4 dB you put in, you'll get 1 dB increase out. Right? So for every 4 dB increase above threshold, you get 1 dB increase in the output level.
Right.
So again, threshold is where it begins. A ratio is the amount of compression once it starts to kick in. The ratio can go from 1 to 1, which is essentially a bypass,
Yeah.
right? It just won't do anything at 1 to 1, all the way up to 20 to 1.
I just want to hear that.
Let me turn the threshold down so you can really hear what's going. You'll really hear it.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it really squashes it.
Really squished.
All right. And so I'm gonna let's turn this down. Let's go 10 to 1 so we can really kind of hear what's
Right.
going on. A lot of analog guitar compressors, like pedal compressors,
Right.
typically have about a 10 to 1 compression ratio. And I mean, if it's not adjustable, 10 to
Right.
1 is pretty standard.
So, I mean, I actually didn't realize that was kind of in most cases fixed. But I guess that kind of stands to reason. If you get like 2 knob thing, gain and volume
Yeah.
or something, yeah.
Although guitar compressors are a little different from what we have here. And I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here.
Okay, go for it.
So essentially, there's generally speaking, there's 2 different topologies
Right.
of compressor: feed forward and feedback.
Right.
So feed forward looks at the input signal, figures out how much gain reduction to apply to it, and then applies that gain reduction. Feedback looks at the output signal and adjusts the gain to try to
Interesting.
get it to match some output level. So a lot of, at least classic guitar pedal compressors are the feedback topology.
Interesting.
And it gives it a little bit different sound.
Right.
This is a feed-forward compressor.
Right.
Just generally speaking, feed-forward compressors are going to give you a little more accuracy in the amount of compression, whereas feedback, it has to kind of hunt a little more to figure out where to get that output level. You also
Gotcha.
can't really get really, really high compression ratios with feedback
Right.
because it's looking at it has to use the increase in the output level
Right.
to set that attenuation. And so you can't do that if you got essentially a fixed output level,
Right.
if that makes sense.
No, I get. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, how does it know what it's, because it's affecting that?
Right.
Yeah. So you need
Right.
like a feedback loop or something.
And so that's why those older compressors have a ratio of around 10 to 1, which is fairly high,
Right.
but it's not super high. It's about as high as it can get in that kind of topology.
Right.
Okay, so let's move to the next screen. This sets the sort of the dynamics of the compressor, the attack and release. Attack is the amount of time it takes for the gain reduction to engage,
Right.
and release is the amount of time it takes for it to disengage.
Once it's below the threshold.
Once it's below the threshold. So let's go ahead and just play with these so you can kind of hear what it sounds like. I'm going to turn the attack up.
Yeah, you can hear it delay a little there.
You can hear it. You can hear the compression kind of start to squish at the beginning. And again, this is at 20 milliseconds, so let's turn it back down to as low as you can set it, 0.1 milliseconds.
Yeah, and it's just constant that way. Yeah.
So I'm going to return it back to where we started, which is 1 millisecond. And let's move to the release. Let's turn this all the way down. All the way down to 20 milliseconds.
Yeah, you'll hear it more when you hold it up. And you can kind of feel it.
Right. So as it releases, it's matching more closely the sort of as the string decays out.
Right.
You know. So let's turn this up all the way to 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second. Yeah, you can hear it. It squashes and kind of holds it more before it starts to come up.
Yeah. I'm not holding it long enough. That's a second, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there you hear it.
And there you hear it come back.
You hear it start to release.
Once it hits that threshold, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't remember where we started. Was it 120? Something like that?
Something like that.
Close enough. All right, let's move on to the next screen. All right, so here we have gain and emphasis. Gain is the makeup gain. So this is the amount of gain it applies after the compression, because compression is going to reduce the signal
volume,
level.
Yeah.
You typically want to add a little bit of gain afterward so that your overall level matches what you put into it.
Right. Otherwise, compression's just a volume reduction, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just reduces the gain. So this allows you to add a fixed gain so that overall, it kind of gets you back in that same area where you started. But now you've got the reduced dynamic range, the increased sustain.
Yeah.
And then, and like I said, it's just a fixed gain, so I don't think we need to go through that.
Right.
The other parameter here is emphasis. Now, this is a filter that's in the side chain of the compressor. The side chain is the part of the compressor that figures out the gain reduction.
Right.
So this is not in the direct signal path. It doesn't affect it doesn't affect the spectrum of what you hear.
Right.
It's just used to change the frequency content of the detector.
Right.
That figures out the amount of gain reduction. And this is essentially a tilt filter.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's going to emphasize or de-emphasize certain frequencies.
So you can really fine-tune it into even the song you're playing, yeah. And that instrument, yeah.
Yeah. So positive frequencies are going to accentuate the higher frequencies more.
Right.
And then negative, or what did I say? Higher dB values are going to accentuate
higher frequencies.
Lower dB values or negative dB values are going to accentuate the lower frequencies more.
Gotcha.
So let me play with this,
okay.
and so you can kind of hear what it actually does to the compression.
Let's do it.
So we're going to start out here at negative 7 dB. And let's turn this up. Actually, let's start at 0 here, 0 dB. 0 dB is the same as no filter in there.
Gotcha.
All right. And let's go ahead and just turn this up.
Oh, wow.
So this is at 20 dB.
And it almost sounds more like an acoustic. I hear the high frequencies.
So here it's going to increase the high frequencies going into the detector. So it's going to compress more on the high frequencies than it would on the low frequencies.
Right.
All right, so let's just contrast this with turning it all the way down to negative 20 dB. You really want to squash the low frequencies a lot. It's like
It's,
when you hit those low notes, they're almost
it's almost
go
like
away.
an amp with bad bias.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, just there, and I'm just going to take it out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what a typical compressor would do. A lot of these by default use
I've never had a compressor that did that, actually. I mean, maybe I have. I've never actually played with the feature.
yeah, I don't know if any of them use a tilt filter like this. I think some might put some kind of filtering in there.
But it's a good point, because if you have a really spiky guitar and you don't want it to like overwhelm the frequency that the guitar tends to live in,
Yeah.
you know, because you want to EQ that out later or whatnot, it kind of renders your compressor, if it's full frequency, it would render the compressor relatively useless. You know, well, maybe not useless, but just that overwhelming frequency would punch down everything when you maybe didn't want it to do that. So being able to kind of select that is kind of cool.
Yeah, and so something to keep in mind, especially when it comes to guitars and guitar pickups.
Yeah.
So a guitar pickup is actually responding to the velocity of the string, not the position.
Right.
Velocity is the differential of position.
Right.
So in terms of like frequency, like what does that do to the frequency spectrum?
Right.
It's actually like a 6 dB per octave upward slope, right? So it's going to exit like what's actually coming off of the pickup.
Right.
If you've ever seen like a frequency response plot of a pickup, those are
Right.
usually integrated, right? To try to show position, just because it looks nicer. It looks like it's kind of sort of flat in the middle,
Right.
and then it'll show you the resonant peak when it drops off above that. And it just looks nice, right?
Right.
Whereas what's actually coming off a pickup is differentiated.
Right.
And so it just looks, it's got this upward slope, and it's kind of hard to see, like, it's harder to see what's going on.
Right.
So your higher frequencies are actually exaggerated
Right.
from what's coming off the pickup. And so that's why a lot of these default settings or modes in here have a negative emphasis, is to
Right.
try to correct for that a little bit.
Yeah.
And it just makes the compression work a little better.
Yeah. Well, and it's we I say Quilter Labs, we've because people have tended to over the years as well, and it's a funny thing. Some people will really feel like one speaker that you used is really dark and muffled, and the other person feels like, man, it's really bright. But it gets down to pickups, really, at the end of the day. People are oftentimes fighting with that. So it's interesting that you've compensated for that out of the gate. I didn't know that. See, I'm learning stuff today.
Yeah. All right. So that was the
Compressor.
So let me just put this back to some kind of moderate setting here. And now we're going to move on to the noise gate. So a lot of these, when we get into the parameters for this, they're going to look very familiar, because compression and noise gate are both dynamics processors. So they have a lot of the same parameters.
Right.
So that's kind of why I stuck these together in the same conversation.
Right.
So the first thing I should note is that this says gate, and we call it a noise gate, but it's actually a downward expander.
Right. A downward expander. What's
So
a downward
exactly, a lot of people are like, "What? I don't know what that is."
I don't know what that is.
So, really, this is a way to apply some noise reduction.
Right.
Right. If you have noisy pickups, and this is why we selected the Strat, which has
Really
single
noisy.
coil pickups, which are going to be a little noisier, or you're doing something high gain, you're going to need some noise reduction. And that's essentially what a gate is.
Right.
A downward expander. So we kind of intuitively have a better feel for what a gate is, and that's another reason why we call it a gate.
Right.
So a noise gate, once your signal drops below a certain threshold, it just attenuates the output. Typically, it just attenuates it all the way to zero,
Right.
or minus infinity if you're talking dB.
Right.
It just mutes it. A downward expander does that more gradually. So instead of just chopping it off, it actually applies a certain amount of gain reduction that is dependent on the signal level itself. So the further you get below the threshold, the more gain reduction it applies.
Gotcha.
And so it just allows for a smoother transition
Right.
between.
Instead of just a clip off, it lets you turn it slowly off.
Right. It's like you get your hand on a fader, and once the signal drops below a certain threshold, you start to turn it down.
Right.
And so the lower the signal is, the more you turn it down.
Gotcha.
And I found that just works way better than a noise gate. Because initially I had a noise gate, and I wasn't happy with how it sounded.
Right.
I tried some different things, like frequency-dependent gating and things like that.
Right.
It wasn't until I changed it to a downward expander that I was really happy with how it sounded. It just works way better.
I mean, it's like this is like magic, I have to say, especially when you're doing high gain stuff, especially when you're playing with a noisy instrument. Yeah, it's magic.
And really the only difference as far as you, the user, will be able to tell is that there's one additional parameter, which is the ratio. Again, ratio and compressor.
Kind of like compressor, yeah.
Now you've got a ratio control that determines how quickly that the gain reduction gets applied once you drop below the threshold.
Right.
All right. So, like all the other blocks, the gate block has modes, and we've set these up to help you match the type of pickup you're using, because we found that tends to work pretty well, like just out of the gate. If you're trying to figure out like how much noise reduction do I need, it really kind of depends on what kind of pickups you have,
Right.
as well as maybe how much gain you have. So you'll notice we've got this setup here. So the minimum, the mode that has the least amount of reduction is called noise floor only. So what this does is essentially set up just to eliminate the noise only from Elevate itself. So you can hear the pickups, right?
I can hear it now, yeah.
You can hear the pickups buzzing. But if you turn the volume down, so now the noise reduction is actually, it's on, but it's just gating off whatever residual noise is coming from Elevate itself.
Got it.
So this is pretty much like the minimum setting. And typically I recommend if you don't want to have any kind of noticeable noise reduction, I think that the tendency is to turn it off.
Right.
But I would actually recommend that you turn it on and use the noise floor only setting.
Right.
So, and then the next mode is going to be a little bit more noise reduction, and it's set up for a humbucker pickup. So you can still hear a little bit of buzz here from the single coils.
Yeah, from the single coils.
Yeah. So on a humbucking pickup, it's going to be a little quieter.
Right.
This is going to be a little better suited for that.
Yeah.
All right. So the next highest setting is going to be for single coil pickups.
Which, I turned it up and nothing.
You can hear it.
But there it goes.
There it goes.
Yeah.
So these are all kind of set up so that the noise reduction engages with the volume control up, but not playing anything.
Right.
At least that's kind of the way I try to dial it in.
Right.
It's gonna depend on your pickups, right?
Yeah.
Some pickups are hotter than others. But
Well, and it's customizable, so you can
Yeah.
build presets that are perfect for you.
right.
Yeah.
So if you want something that's a little more dialed in, you just copy this into your custom settings and tweak the threshold a little bit or something.
Right.
All right, so the next highest setting, ungrounded. So this is if you have a setup where you have no path to earth ground, right? So you're like, say you got guitar into Elevate into headphones, and that's it, right? So there's no path to earth ground anywhere. Sometimes systems like that can hum a little bit.
Right.
And so if you have that kind of issue, then this mode is kind of adjusted to work well for that,
Right.
to help remove some of that noise.
And it's working pretty good right now.
Yeah, so this is going to be a higher amount of noise reduction from a single coil.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next one, extreme gain. If you have a lot of gain, I mean, obviously that's going to be pretty noisy. So this has a higher threshold and a quicker release. So
So it's meant for crunchy crunch, yeah.
yeah,
Got
it's
it.
meant for settings that have a lot of gain. And then that's it for the modes. So let's start with a single coil, copy that into the custom mode, and then we'll go through the parameters one at a time. So first screen, we have threshold and ratio. Threshold sets the threshold at below which noise reduction engages.
Right.
Ratio is how quickly that noise reduction is going to be applied below
Okay.
the threshold. Or in other words, like, so for every in this case, we have a ratio of 0.6 to 1.
Right.
So what that means is for every 0.6 dB, your signal drops below the threshold, 1 dB of signal level reduction
Right.
is going to be applied to that, right? So in this case, like if I were to go 1-to-1, then you get no noise reduction. It's just a bypass.
Right.
So the more you turn this down, you can kind of hear it. So here at 1-to-1, you can hear the single coils buzzing.
The sound of the...
And as I turn this down, you'll hear it more and more gain reduction get applied.
So it's a very dynamic thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like a cutoff. It's a how fast do you want it to go. Yeah.
Right. Okay, next screen. Attack and release.
How fast do you want it to go?
Right. So attack is how quickly the gate opens or the expander opens when
Right.
you get above the threshold.
Right.
And then release is how quickly the gain reduction is applied after you drop below the threshold.
Right. So attack is how fast it comes back to life. It's louder. Release
Right.
is how
Right.
fast it shuts down. Got it.
Right. And I think a lot of people's instinct is to just take the attack and just turn that all the way down, right? They want it to open as fast as possible.
Right.
But generally, you don't typically want to do that because having the gate, because remember that this responds to your input signal level,
Right.
okay? Which is not always going to be like really smooth the way, it increases and decreases. And so if the attack is too short, then you can get something that kind of pops or like it almost sounds like it's popping open,
Right.
or something like that. And you can kind of hear that as a little bit of audible distortion
Right.
under certain circumstances. So generally you want a little bit of attack just to smooth it out a little bit.
Right. Oh, and depending upon if, like heavy distortion or something where if you're chugging, right, you probably would want that to be smoother. So you could almost think of it as
Well, for stuff like that, if when you have the threshold set really high,
right.
you might want to reduce the attack a little bit just because the gate has further to open.
Gotcha.
And so you might want to reduce that a little bit, but
right.
just you kind of have to be careful when you adjust that, and just be aware that you don't necessarily want to just make that as low as possible.
Gotcha.
Set it as low as it needs to be,
Okay.
to where you can't
Where it sounds
hear
natural.
Right, where it sounds natural.
Right.
But not lower than that.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, that temptation to, because you think of attack. I think of it in a different way. So it's a little bit, it's slightly backwards in the gate, the way I would think of it.
Right. It is backward. In the compressor, the attack is how quickly the gain
compressor
reduction is
acts.
applied.
Yeah.
But here the attack is how quickly the gain reduction is released. Essentially,
Yeah.
it is
Gotcha.
backward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Actually, good to know.
All right, and the last parameter here is low frequency sensitivity. So this, again, like the compressor, we put a filter in the side chain.
Right.
This is a filter in the side chain, but it's a different filter.
Right.
This is a high pass filter. So we're rolling off the low frequencies.
Right.
Again, this is just in the side chain, not in your direct signal path.
Right.
What this does is it effectively raises the threshold of the gate signal
Gotcha.
in the low frequencies. So by decreasing the amount of signal in the low frequencies, you're increasing the threshold, the apparent threshold.
Right.
And so you're wondering, like, why would you want to do that? Well, so for example, a guitar, low E on a guitar,
Right.
standard tuning, is about 82 hertz. So if you got signal below that, like 60 hertz hum.
Like a 7-string guitar.
Well,
60 hertz hum. Okay.
Okay, you got 60 hertz hum, right?
I have it right now.
I mean, anything below 82 hertz is going to be noise.
Right.
And you don't want your gate opening being triggered
Right.
by that noise.
Right.
So if you have 60 hertz hum, you don't want that triggering, you don't want it, popping your gate open.
Right.
So by using this filter, you can sort of increase that apparent threshold below the frequency that you dial in.
Gotcha.
And it will reduce the tendency for the gate to open based on that low frequency noise.
Right.
So generally speaking, if you got standard tuning, I would suggest setting this at least at like 82 hertz. I mean,
It's working.
you probably want to set it even higher. I think on this preset we had it at 120.
Right.
It's just going to make it more immune to things like 60 hertz noise.
While still functioning just fine.
Right.
Yeah.
It's still going to respond to your signal. It's just not going to respond as much to the noise.
Right.
Okay? I hope that
fine.
makes sense.
It's like fine tuning for noise, really. At the end of the day, which could be really useful if you find yourself in a there's a couple of clubs where they decided to put the electrical panel right next to where you have to actually perform, and that would be handy for dialing that out.
Yeah. I mean, and especially something like a single coil pickup, the noise is predominantly 60 cycle.
Yeah.
Or harmonics of 60 cycle hum.
That's why it was interesting that you were at 120 because
Well, and that's why we're at 120. So you still get a little bit lower sensitivity at 120 as well.
yeah, harmonics are just basically the doubling of the frequency.
Yeah, just multiples of the bass frequency.
Yeah.
So 60 hertz hum is not only 60 hertz. It's actually there's a lot of 120 hertz and other multiples of 60 hertz in there. All right, so that's all of the parameters for the gate. So next I wanted to talk about some of the global, well, not some of, all of the global settings. So the button all the way on the right is global. If you touch that, first thing you get is the headphone level, headphone/aux level. So the TRS jack on the back of the unit can be used as either a headphone jack or a TRS auxiliary output.
Right. Which is handy if you're using monitors and you want to have a separate monitor mix than your stage mix.
Right.
Yeah.
So this controls the level of that. Wow, we got the headphone level cranked on this. Somebody using it. It goes, so 0 is the max, and it will go all the way down to mute. So pretty wide range. By the way, this controls a digitally controlled analog pot, okay? Which means that as you turn this down, it actually will also attenuate any noise from like the digital conversion and things like that.
Oh, interesting.
So overall, you just get a higher signal to noise ratio by doing it that way.
Right.
And the same is true on the next control, which is for the line outputs. So line output level is separate from the headphone level. This controls the 1/4 inch and XLR outs.
Right.
And this control, you can get a little bit of gain on it, 7 dB, but then you can also attenuate this all the way down to mute, 43 dB, and then mute. So again, pretty wide range, and this is controlling a digitally controlled analog pot.
Right.
All right. Next screen here is the line out EQ. So we got a little bit of EQ that is applied just to the line outputs.
Right.
If you want. So it's disabled right now. So let's go ahead and enable this.
But we won't hear the difference because we're not going line out right now.
Right, we're not going line out, and also, right now the EQs is set at 0 dB. But what this gives you is a low and a high shelf filter, where you can adjust the level of the shelf and the frequency
Interesting.
of the shelf.
Now, this could resolve some of that. Sometimes when people play through digital, one of the things that has kind of widely been observed when you're working with digital modelers, right, is definitely something that I've seen, is there's a certain kind of crispiness to it that's a little, that you're working on your headphones or you're working on your home studio, little 5-6 inch monitors at home. Then when you go to play at the gig and now you're playing on like a real compression driver.
Right,
and
compression drivers.
Yep. You go from sounding great at home to what on earth happened to my tone when you get to the gig. So that's interesting because you can dial some of that out from your line. And
right. And this just affects the line outputs, not the headphone output.
Right.
Which again, you can use that as an aux output for your monitor.
Right.
So it's not going to change what you hear through your monitor.
Gotcha.
Just what's being sent to the line outputs.
Right.
So yeah, you can alleviate some of that crispiness, or and then you've also got the a low shelf if you've got any kind of boominess, or
Right.
if it's too thin and you want to add a little bit of low end.
And I've seen that before. There's sometimes monitors are hit and miss. Sometimes, you go play somewhere and man, the monitors are just, they have QSE K series. They sound fantastic. And sometimes you show up and they have, whatever on earth, something they picked up at the pawn shop from the 80s. And they have an amplifier powering them all, and it's all bad.
Yeah.
And that I would have saved my butt at a gig or two. But can you adjust other things besides low?
You can adjust the low and the high. So
Low
there's
and
two,
high.
There's
Okay,
two
yeah.
shelf filters.
All right, 2 shelf filters.
Yeah.
Very cool. And how much too?
So on the high, you can get up to 12 dB of gain on the high.
Oh, you can boost it.
You can boost or cut.
Cool.
And frequency goes from 1 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz.
Right.
It's pretty wide range there. On the low, let me see. Let me put this back to where it was. On the low, I think it's a little different. Yeah, 6 dB of gain on the low, minus 18 for the cut. And that is just to try to preserve your headroom, right? You get too much low frequency boost, and you can kind of quickly run into your rail, and you don't want to do that. Don't want to distort the output.
Maybe.
And the frequency on this, from 20 to 1,000 hertz on the low shelf.
Oh, so you can really trim it, even the yeah.
Yeah, it's probably got way more range than you would need. And that's it for the the global settings, one thing to note on the global settings, so this is designed to quickly get at the level control,
Right.
whichever was the last level control that you used.
Right.
Right. So if you're using headphones and you need to quickly get to the level, it's always gonna return. Well, I changed that last time. So it's, like I said, it's the last thing you changed, right? So if I change the headphone level last, whenever I come back here, it's going to go to the headphone
Go
level.
back to the headphones again. Yeah.
But if you last change the line output level, then it's going to return to the line output level.
Got it.
None of the other blocks do that. They always go back to the top,
Right.
the top menu or top screen.
Gotcha.
But the global screen is different. You get one of those two depending on the last thing that you changed.
Because it's most likely the thing you're going to adjust.
Right. It's
again
most likely
next,
the thing
yeah.
you're going to want to get back
I
to
turned my
quickly.
headphones down too far. What do I need when I touch
Well,
that?
or worse, they're too loud.
Yeah.
It's too loud and you need to turn it down.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. The alternate foot switch functions. So we've kind of talked about what the foot switches do primarily, but we haven't talked too much about some of their alternate functions. And so you'll see printed right on the unit itself that the preset foot switches can also select your list,
Right.
and the AB recall can also change your main or global bypass, and your tap foot switch can also access the tuner. So let's start with the accessing lists. So you do that by pressing both of the preset foot switches at the same time. And so you'll see that the AB LEDs start to toggle. And so whenever they do that, that's telling you that whatever you select is being queued up, but it's not recalled yet. You
Right.
still need to press the recall foot switch to recall the thing you want to recall, right?
Right.
Obviously, right? So what you'll see here, since I press both the preset foot switches, is you'll see the list, the current list being shown in the display. So right now we're on the all presets list. And the all preset list is always going to be here. You can't delete it. It's always going to be all presets.
It's the factory preset list.
Well, it's factories
Well, it's
and
everything.
It's everything. It's
Users,
all factory
yeah.
presets, all user presets.
Yeah.
And you kind of need that list to be there
Right.
in order to have access to all of the presets, right? That's why you can't delete it.
Gotcha.
So we've also have, we don't, what happened to,
Speaking of firmwares,
are we missing our example?
apparently.
Apparently somebody deleted, but maybe we should just, should I do a deep, should I reset this unit?
Go for it.
All right. We're going to talk about this later, all the stuff you can do in the setup menu.
But for now, we're going to do a factory reset.
I'm going to do a factory reset because I want to restore our example list.
Where did the list go? Probably my fault.
Yeah, I hope you didn't have any presets on there that.
Nope.
Okay, that's good. And let's also, it just paired to your iPhone. I'm going to turn that off.
Good idea. I'll get calls, and sure enough.
Okay, let's try this again. Press both the preset foot switches to bring up the list menu, and then it'll show you all presets. And then
There
now,
it is.
there it is. You can see these what we call example faves. This is just it's an example list. That's all it is.
Well, it's our attempt to go. These are the ones we think are really cool.
Yeah.
Preset.
Yeah.
That we think sound just exactly like what you would hear if you were playing on the record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as you just saw, you can delete that list,
Yeah.
right? So you can use the foot switches to select your list, or you can turn the knob. If you turn the knob, it will also show you the list number. So As I mentioned, list 0, all presets, always going to be there. And then anything beyond that, you are free to delete, create, do whatever you want
Right.
with. You can have up to 50 lists. And then each list can have up to 50 presets on it. So we're going to select this example faves list. So press the recall foot switch, and it loads the list. But you notice the LEDs are still toggling because now you need to select the preset on that list.
Yeah.
This allows you to queue up a preset on a different list without actually loading anything in between, right?
Right.
If you're in a live situation and you want to change to a different preset and you know, oh, I got it on this other list, then you can get to it without it loading anything else in between.
Right.
It'll always show you the first preset on the list first, and then you can use the foot switches or use the knob. If you use the knob, it also shows you the name of the list. And then press the recall foot switch to load that preset. So, that's it. That's all there is to recalling lists. So we'll do it one more time just to show you. Press both. Change the list. Load the list, and then select your
Song.
your preset within that list.
Very cool.
So, fairly simple.
Set lists. Get your set lists.
Set list, gig list, whatever. Yeah, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to use it for. And then I think maybe next week, we'll get into a lot of the preset management. And so we'll talk about how to make a list and add presets to lists and things like that.
Yeah.
So the next alternate foot switch function is the master bypass. So again, it tells you right here, hold for 1 second. So hold the recall foot switch for 1 second. LEDs, the AB LEDs go out to indicate it's bypassed.
And there it is.
And there it is. Now, a couple things to note. When you are bypassed, you can still queue up presets. And they just, they'll be loaded up, ready to go once
Right.
you unbypass.
The assumption is that if you bypassed it, you did it because you're just checking your cables or whatnot, or your
Yeah.
instrument.
Or someone might want to use this as like a effects processor or something
Right.
where maybe they want to bypass the whole thing for
Right.
some reason. So, you can certainly do that if you want. The other thing you can do in bypass mode is you can queue up the A or the B. You notice it just blinks.
Oh, interesting.
It blinks to tell you
That you're bypassed. Yeah.
which, whether it's A or B that
Right.
is queued up.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And it also is showing on the display that you're bypassed as a reminder. Like,
So once I come out of
right, so right now, let's queue up B. And then once I re-enable, it loads up B.
gotcha.
Right? And then you also, you notice that when you are bypassed, it continually reminds you whenever you do anything that you are bypassed, right? 'Cause it's easy to get, the only other indication is the LEDs, or these two AB LEDs
Are off.
Are off. But
Right.
other than that, it's sometimes a little difficult to tell that you're bypassed.
But
So-
if you try to do anything, it'll.
but yeah,
remind
if you try to
yeah.
do anything, it's going to show on the display.
And you just hold it for a second to release that.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right, and then the last alternate foot switch function is the tuner. And so you hold the tap tuner button for 1 second and loads up the tuner. When the tuner is activated, the tap LED will be on solid. And then you'll also see that bar. So if you don't have enough signal present, you'll just see a bar. Once you get
Gotcha.
enough signal present, then it'll actually show you the tuner. And it shows you the pitch. It'll show whether you're flat or sharp, and then by how much. So each vertical bar that you see, the vertical bar kind of floating around, that's 2 cents is how far each one of those vertical bars is.
Nice. Of course, it turns out I needed it right now. So
So when you are on pitch, you'll see the arrows indicating that you're on pitch.
It's kind of interesting because, like right now with the tuner on, I see the in little LED at the top above the display there coming on, but not the out. So it's
Right.
letting you know that you got signal coming in, but you're not putting anything out.
Right. Whenever the tuner is activated, the output will be muted. So you can use the tuner as just a global mute if you want.
Right.
Yeah. Also, in tuner mode, if you turn the knob and you've got to turn it to the right, it will bring up the settings menu for the tuner.
For all you 432 hertz people out there.
Right. So if you want to change concert A, this is where you do it. Also, you can change how your accidentals are displayed, whether you want those as sharps or flats. And then to get out of this, you just turn to the left and it returns back to your tuner screen.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. The tuner, I've designed it to be tighter than your typical clip-on tuner.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that so I have a Peterson strobe tuner that I use in the studio, and I noticed that if I'm on the Elevate, I'm also dead, solid on the strobe tuner. So yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, of course I'm going to say that, but it's comparative to a strobe tuner, just so you have an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, the accuracy is really only limited by the display.
Right.
Because you've only got so many segments, and so you've only got so much granularity in what you can show.
Right.
That being said, originally I had designed it to make a little better use of the display, so it was even tighter originally.
Right.
And I found that it was so tight that it was really hard to dial it in to the point where it said it was on pitch.
I remember this.
It was actually very frustrating to use.
Yeah.
And so I had to actually reduce increase the granularity that was shown on the display. Because originally it was like maybe, plus or minus a half a cent or 3/4 of a cent, something like that.
Yeah.
I increased it to plus or minus 1 cent. And then I also did some other stuff just to improve how it was displayed, just to make it a little easier to use. And even at plus or minus 1 cent is like really accurate, actually.
Yeah. Like I said, I find it comparative to an expensive tuner, so.
All right, and then to get out of the tuner, you can either hold it again for 1 second, or you can just short press it. Either way, it gets you back. And that's it for the alternate foot switch functions. I'm looking at the clock, and we are at 1 hour. So I think it's time for a Q&A. Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions from our viewers out there?
Yeah, we forgot to tell everybody at the beginning, if you have a question, feel free to ask.
Yeah, well, now's your chance if you got questions. We're not actually looking at the comments directly here, so.
I'm looking at you, Jim, in Des Moines.
Yeah.
I see you. You're thinking hard about that question.
So
somewhere we have crickets chirping, I think.
Okay. Our producer tells us no questions.
Yep.
Well, I guess that's good, right?
Well, it's either we really explained everything or nobody's watching.
Or nobody's watching,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, it's probably a little bit of both. It's Friday. It's in the morning out here on the West Coast. It's, it's lunchtime over on the East Coast. So,
yeah.
And of course, there's the rest of the world,
Yep. All right. Well, next week, we're going to do this again. July 18th, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern.
You wouldn't think that you could take many, many hours to explain the function of a unit that's this simple. But what's cool for me, so, again, I programmed a lot of the factory presets. And I have to say, I didn't get this course before I did that. So there was an awfully big learning curve, and getting into the depth of what it does, probably I would go back and do them slightly differently. But, we made several passes, in that process. So, the nice thing here was, we built them on a set of monitors, but when we actually did our kind of final auditions, we did those on a completely different, different set of speakers, with the intention that we're looking for like oddities that might have been introduced from the sound of the speakers that they were created with in the first place. But that was also a chance to kind of come in and modify things, you know. So we would, you know, give a listen to the actual source material and then play along with the actual source material and really kind of, you know, go, hey, does this in fact replicate songs? And that's partly, I think, it's a fun conversation, which we're going to dig into more later. It's what I keep saying. It's a song-based thing, you know. My musical career has predominantly been limited by this idea that, man, I just need like 5 food groups of tone. And my head was really wrapped around that, you know, for the longest time. And in a weird sort of way, it becomes kind of its own little shackling thing. You're stuck with that because you really got only 5 things. So if you actually go to record like an album at length, you need a lot more sounds. You need a lot more tones. And that kind of can be a little bit of an impediment when you're kind of stuck with a few things, because the producer, if it's you or if it's someone else, may need to get something that you don't necessarily have on that pedal board, right? And we got to spend some time talking about that too. Maybe not the next episode, but it's the song-based way is so much better. And I've done things now that I didn't even know I could do because of that. You know, we made the presets to really replicate songs, not equipment. So we're not going, hey, here's what our, you know, JCM 800 sounds like when we put some greenbacks on it, say, you know, 60s greenbacks. Nah, we're saying, does this sound like that? When I play, am I getting the same results out of it? And so the thing that I guess I'm getting at is the approach is so much simpler, right? And as we're digging deeper into these, I'm realizing, man, I could have done it even faster, because there's considerable hours spent trying to achieve that. After having listened to, you know, especially today, I was using the gate all wrong. Sorry if you have a preset. And I think he fixed it actually, but you know, I didn't know it was backwards. I really didn't. So I would just set something up and kind of try to achieve what it was that I was hearing, and worry a little less about, you know, the fine-tuned details. It's pretty awesome. Like the ability to kind of dive deeper into this and have a deeper understanding is pretty phenomenal, you know. And being able to build the right sound for a given song, or even a part in a song, is kind of incredible, you know.
Yeah.
And you're no longer limited, you know, by you don't have to impose self-limitations to simplify things for you anymore. Right? It's simple enough to dial this. And that was, you know, again, shout out to old Jack out there, but you know, he was just going, it took me 5 minutes, no manual, no nothing. It took me 5 minutes to figure this thing out, and I'm creating the sounds I want. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a testament to opening up kind of the world of digital for everybody in this, you know?
Yeah. We put a lot of effort into making this accessible so that you can do a lot without getting down into stuff at the parameter level.
Yeah.
So just working off of factory presets or selecting one of the modes in the blocks, you can get like 90%.
That's how I started on 90% of the presets. Yeah.
So if you're just doing that, I mean, yeah, we can explain this. We can explain Elevate in like just minutes, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't take any time at all to really understand how to use it.
Yep.
And so the reason we're spending like hours and hours and hours going through all of the features on this unit is because it actually does a lot.
It really does.
If you look at every single thing it does, if you get down into the details. And if you're one of those people that really likes to do that, then you certainly can do that with this unit.
Right.
But you don't need to use it.
No, you don't really. Truly, it's kind of astonishing. I mean, I guess the aha for me as we're going through it is I would happily take any one of these functions out, right? I'd take that compressor, and it would be a better compressor than pretty much anything I could buy separately or individually. I could take out the pre-EQ, and it would be better than any pre-EQ I could just buy for my instrument, right? And this kind of applies as we go through the chain. And I have to say, there's a lot to, because we say for $499, what else is going to do all this?
Yeah.
Well, that what else just got deeper, because I could spend more than that, and I still wouldn't get the same results.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's I keep talking about it, but like as I'm recording, as I'm like actually utilizing the thing, it's revitalized what I do, because I'm no longer stuck with a thing that is my tone. I can have any tone I want. So if I need something crispy and chunky or whatever, I'm there in mere minutes, and then I can save that. And if I'm playing live later, I've got it. I don't have to go digging around and figuring out how to recreate a sound. I created it, and now I can use it. It does more than I think we even realize. So, all righty. Well, I guess we'll wrap this up. And
yeah. So next week, I think we're gonna talk about the preset management. And the setup options, and then I think that's it. And then I think we're finally done talking about everything that this does.
Well, with one exception. So we'll bring you back later, and we'll talk more about. Although we're going to have some artists come in and visit, and that's actually going to be some fun. So later on today, Ron Artis is in town, so I'm going to pre-record this one for the end of the month because I'll be out of town. So I'm going to pre-record one. We'll talk a little bit about the music industry. That'll be kind of interesting. So, make sure you like and subscribe and and ring that bell. But now we're gonna, it's part of the fun is opening it up and talking. The dream is to talk about the things that actually affect the industry itself. We were chatting last night at the end of the show. So Ron played here locally in Costa Mesa, and he and the sound guy, also Chris. What's up, Chris? We're talking about kind of the state of the industry, right? The music industry. So for you musicians who are actually playing and gigging and trying to actually make, a living playing music, it is treacherous waters out there. So that's one of the things I'm going to be chatting later today with Ron about in that pre-recorded segment. It's Pat Quilter, he always says, musicians make about the same today that they did in 1968 when I got started for a gig, and that is part of, I think, of the problem. But even when it comes to music gear, it's part of the problem too, because the industry has kind of been gobbled up by massive venture capital firms. And so, one could argue that maybe that adds strength to them, but I could also make the argument that they're less concerned with the strength of the product and a little more concerned with how to make money. Well, that turns out that's across the board. That was kind of the interesting take that, I had observed in that conversation. So we're going to open it up. We're going to talk, and feel free to make suggestions. What do you guys want to hear? What things do you want us to cover? Because that's what we want to know. We'll bring in the people and get them to talk. I'll make them talk. I'll put the little light bulb over their head. Where were you last night at 6 p.m.? Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Yep. We'll see you guys next time.
I found peace, loving on those who hate me. I found joy, raising babies with an angel on earth. I found worthless, saving dollars on a rock in space. I won't kill for gold, no, no.